put me a piece of paper there and then put a carbon piece of carbon on top.
Spitfires would fly by. It was a crazy time.
So your days of carbon copy, much easier, Bill, because you took that carbon copy to one another.
No. Look, I'll tell you the
right?
easiest thing with email is I checked my Gmail today. I've got 25,000 unread emails. So all I do, well, this is over the course of, all the time I've had it. And all I do is go through every day and I say, I'm not reading that, that's rubbish. I'm not reading that one, that's rubbish. I'm not reading that one, that's rubbish. And I just go for, you just look at who sent it to you or what the keywords are and you open it if you want to. But, overload on email, that's a very 21st century thing, isn't it?
But hang on, I just can't get to grips with your process. If a person sends you an email,
you see who it is.
You see who, and if you don't like that person, you just delete it.
Well, you could delete it. I just tend to leave it there.
Right.
And I don't open it. I mean, if I see, Wallace, don't ignore it. No, but you know what I mean. You just, you get so much garbage coming through.
Absolutely.
I hit unsubscribe on a lot of this stuff, but they still come back.
What about in the workplace in terms of sometimes this culture of CCing in people, Joe?
Yeah.
What's that about?
It can be a bit of covering of one's position, a bit of broadcasting of one, a sort of tool of virtue signaling. But email's just a tool. The people who are using it as a sort of arse covering, presenteeism. I mean, those are people who will do the same thing with the other tools available to them. So it's just a tool. It's up to you how you use it. I mean, I think it's worth having some, I get a lot of emails every day. I've never counted, but I'd say it'd definitely be in the three figures, 100 and something.
Are you serious? Every day?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. If CC is carbon copy, what's BCC?
Blind carbon copy.
Oh, you're on fire.
I know. My mind was blown.
My goodness me. So you don't have any sort of particular protocols? I mean, there's a French law passed in 2017 that bars work email after hours. It's called the right to disconnect. So, companies with more than 50 employees have to establish when staff should not or answer emails.
Well, I mean, I've always...
What do you reckon, Bill?
Well, no, I think if people want to work as hard as they want, I mean, in those circumstances, that
but you self-censor, don't you? So it's implied pressure. You as a boss can say you don't have to work, but you know what people do.
Yeah, but I think that if you wanted to get your emails done overnight and the number of times I've worked overnight. It's huge, So, that's very French, isn't it? Very France.
Well, actually, I have always thought, and I've talked about friends who are in, law firms which have pulled these crazy hours and things. I don't think it looks very professional to send an email at,
3 in
midnight or 4 in the morning.
Probably deranged by then.
Yeah, really. You're making bad choices at that time.
Yeah. Very bad choices at 3 a.m, huh? Yeah. Hey, what a great team you have been. Thank you very much for being with us. Bill Ralston and Joe McCarroll there. I'm Wallace Chapman, back next week. Checkpoint now. And thank you very much to Ali Ventura. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, a former top Hawke's Bay cricketer turned serial groper is jailed for 5 years for assaulting 11 women. Lumsden's maternity woes continue. Baby number 3 is born somewhere it shouldn't have been, this time a car park. Labour MP Willie Jackson tells us why he will be voting in favour of the end-of-life choice bill next week. Protesters march on Oranga Tamariki offices around the country and claims a cut-price gun buyback could see some weapons netting just 50% of their worth. And New Zealand football shouts out for a new all-whites coach after the sudden departure of Fritz Schmid.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susanna Leia taua tēnei. The judge, who sentenced a serial groper to more than 5 years in jail, says his drug, pornography and gambling addiction are not an excuse for what he did. 30-year-old Jason Trembath indecently assaulted 11 victims, including schoolgirls and women with their children, as they exercised in public parks and streets in Hawke's Bay and Rotorua between September and November 2017. He also took and posted an intimate photo of an unconscious woman on Facebook. Judge Jeff Ray said the effect of Trembath's offending on all 12 of his victims and the wider community had been dramatic.
I have read the victim impact statements that have been supplied, and they are heart-wrenching. For a period of time, Mr Trembath, you brought a considerable amount of concern and fear to people in this community.
Judge Jeff Ray. Another baby has made an unexpected arrival in Southland, with a baby delivered in the car park of the Lumsden Maternity Centre. The Lumsden Centre was downgraded to a non-birthing unit in April, despite strong community opposition, and since then 2 babies have had emergency deliveries in the area. Local midwife Nikki Peeling says about 1 o'clock this morning, a mother who was having her 4th child headed into Lumsden Maternity Centre when she thought her waters had broken to meet her midwife.
Her and the midwife arrived at the same time at Lumsden, and she was in a lot of distress, and the baby's head was already born. So the baby got born in the car park, in the car. And that's the problem, is that this lady is not somebody who would wait until the very last minute. You know, she normally has a good few hours to get things organised, but the midwife had no chance of calling anybody else to be there.
Local midwife Nikki Peeling. About 20 vocal protesters have taken to the streets in Christchurch today to challenge the actions of Oranga Tamariki. They say they will be holding events almost daily in the city, along with others in 13 other centres around the country, until the ministry listens to their concerns. It comes as Oranga Tamariki faces intense public scrutiny over the way it takes Maori babies from their whānau. Support workers are expressing doubt that legislative changes from the start of July will deliver any improvements for Maori in the system. Among those protesting in Christchurch today was Mervyn Beard, who says there's too many horror stories emerging, including videos circulating on social media.
Just recently there was a video circulating around social media of a young girl that was getting taken into care by the police, you know, and it was just such a sad thing to say, you know. As an older man, it practically brought me to tears just to see what's happening to our kids.
Protester Mervyn Beard. Workers at a Bluff fish processing plant will fight plans to nearly halve their workforce. Sandford has told its workers it plans to cut up to 30 jobs and move its white fish processing north to Timaru. Union members met in Bluff this afternoon to discuss their options to challenge the proposal. Etu Union delegate Karen Wilson says workers are hurt and angry about the plan. She says the union and workers plan to get the community involved. Ms Wilson says the job cuts would hit the workers, families and their community hard. Sandford's proposal is out for consultation. A gun shop owner consulted as part of the gun buyback scheme says the advice from dealers has been grossly misrepresented. Yesterday it was announced gun owners will get up to 95% of fair market price for handing over banned firearms. Owners with firearms in an average condition will get 70% and 25% for those in poor condition. But firearms dealer Greg Carville says when dealers handed over a list of estimated gun values, in some cases they'd already been depreciated. He says those figures appear to have been used as the base rate, meaning the prices are too low.
The devaluation is too high. Firearms don't devalue in that rate. They're not like a television set that you and I could own, one that cost $5,000 3 years ago and now is only worth $1,200. They have a very slow devaluation rate.
Greg Carville says dealers also advised against oversimplified 3-tiered pricing. Crowds of protesters are building around Hong Kong's legislature building after a deadline set by protest groups expired for the government to abandon an unpopular extradition bill. Hong Kong's government had earlier indicated it would delay the introduction of the controversial bill, which would see suspects in criminal trials extradited to mainland China to face court. The BBC's Nick Beak reports.
From first light, a stream of students dressed in black moved in and sat down outside Hong Kong's assembly. They're angry the extradition bill has still not been officially withdrawn and fear the government could try to bring it back. The demonstrators are also calling for an investigation into allegations of police brutality during last week's protests. An apology from the Justice Secretary this morning has done little to appease the crowds. But the atmosphere so far today has been relaxed and there are no police officers in sight.
Nick Beak in Hong Kong. It's 5:05. All Blacks Full Black Ben Smith says the Highlanders are desperate to upset the Crusaders in tonight's Super Rugby quarter-final in Christchurch. Smith hasn't played since early last month because of a hamstring injury, but returns to the side for possibly his last game for the Highlanders before heading to France at the end of the year. He's keen to get at least another week in a Highlanders jersey and is confident they can beat the defending champions, even if conditions in Christchurch are less conducive to running rugby than Dunedin's roofed stadium.
You need to be desperate. It's quarter-final. If you don't front up on Friday night and play good footy, you go home. So that's got this group really excited. In Christchurch, it could be a bit of a wet night. Yeah, there's a few adjustments, but this group's really excited to get out there and have a crack.
Ben Smith. Meanwhile, former All Black Daryl Gibson has quit as Waratah's coach after 4 years in charge. In football, the All Whites are hunting for a new coach before their next match against Ireland in November after Fritz Schmid resigned today. Schmid was appointed New Zealand coach in February last year on a 4-year contract, but has resigned after just 16 months. He was in charge of the All Whites for 4 matches, losing to Canada and Kenya, but beating Taiwan and India. And more than $300,000 has been donated to Israel Folau for his legal fight against Rugby Australia after he was sacked from the code for homophobic social media posts. Folau hopes to raise $3.5 million from the online appeal. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Indira Stewart, host of our 5 a.m. show. First up, selects the mixtape. Last up, Country Life visits a bloke who farms 50 Jersey cows, all individually named, and no doubt each with her own individual personality. And Paul Pleasure introduces us to the element beryllium, which comes in handy when you want to take x-rays. So no prizes for guessing the topic of this week's Sonic Tonic. On Nights, you can see right through us. Afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow for Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered rain clearing from the west today, then partly cloudy. High cloud developing tomorrow with scattered rain in Northland from the evening. Gisborne finds spells a few showers mainly this evening. Auckland to Wellington, also central high country, Hawke's Bay and Waited Upper. Partly cloudy in the west, isolated showers from Whanganui northwards. High cloud developing and thickening tomorrow. For Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine today apart from rain about Stewart Island. Cloud and isolated showers spreading northwards tomorrow. Bulla, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Westland and Fiordland, showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning but clearing from Fiordland. Thunderstorms possible south of Hokitika until early tomorrow morning. Chatham Islands, rain clears early morning with a foggy start to the day. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 8.5 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A Lumsden woman was forced to give birth in a car park today, the third emergency birth in the area since the Lumsden Maternity Centre was downgraded in April. That meant only one midwife was on hand, unlike 2 in a primary birthing unit, the next closest of which is in Gore, just over 40 minutes away. Clutha Southland MP Hamish Walker has been petitioning the government to reinstate the facility as a primary birthing unit. He says he's worried it will take the death of a newborn baby for anything to change.
This is the third baby in 2 months since the Lumsden Maternity Centre was downgraded that hasn't been able to make it to a primary birthing unit. The hub model that was introduced a couple of months ago is not fit for purpose. I'm pleading yet again to the Prime Minister. Is it going to take a preventable, needless death of a baby before they reinstate full services at the Lumsden Maternity Centre?
The mother's midwife, Sarah Stokes, is unavailable tonight. She's delivering another baby. But a short time ago, her colleague and fellow midwife, Nikki Peeling, told us what happened.
Late last night, the lady who was expecting her 4th baby contacted Sarah to say that labour had started. And they agreed to meet at Lumsden just to do an assessment and to make sure everything was going fine, but things went much quicker than they expected, and Sarah and the woman arrived at the car park at the same time, and the baby was already had the head out, and the baby got born in the car park.
What do you think of that?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, things happen, and women have babies quickly. What's disappointing now is that Sarah, who was the midwife, and that lady had to face that on their own. There was nobody to call. There was nobody to help. There was nowhere for them to really go. I mean, yes, they went back. They did go into the hub after the baby was born, and the husband was with them, and they went in and they delivered the placenta safely. But Sarah was all on her own as the midwife, which is not a safe thing anywhere. Yeah.
So, Lumsden has supposedly got this maternity hub. Did once they got inside, does it have everything you need there or not?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, like they talk about this hub, but it used to be a primary birthing unit. So we know that everything is fine. You know, the heating will go on, and you know, there's linen there, and there's stuff that you can do. There isn't stuff to make a cup of tea, but that's, you know, perhaps that's not the DHB's priorities. But so yes, it's a safe place to give birth now. Yeah.
But no
it
other.
Wasn't so safe.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but no other assistance inside for you. Even if you make it inside, there's nobody else in there who can help you. You're on your own still.
Absolutely not. Sarah would have had to call somebody to come. And the midwife who lives in Tiana right now, Jo, who potentially could be her backup, is on holiday at the moment. And her backup is Isabel Devry, who lives in Tuatapere. So nobody would have got to help Sarah, right, you know, in time.
Well,
she called me the other week for another birth that was quick, and I live just outside of Tiana. It took me 40 minutes because it was -3 that night. So there is nobody there to be, you know, on site, which is what we used to have. There was a midwife at Lumsden, 24/7. Didn't matter whether you came from, you know, Tiana or just down the road. There was always a midwife there. Yeah.
So what if there'd been complications?
Well, that's right. I mean, this is why we are bringing this up again and again. We have been talking to the DHB about what they've taken away from Lumsden, and that is the 24-hour backup midwife. And we've made them aware of that since February this year, and we still haven't had any meeting to address that issue.
So no meeting, no contact?
No, we had a meeting on the 1st of April, when that was the first time that they met with the midwives to discuss it, and they promised us further meetings since then, but we've had nothing.
So how risky is the situation currently then, in your professional view?
In my professional view, it is totally unacceptable to have so few midwives in a large area without the ability to have somebody on call and available in a reasonable time. I mean, they could put somebody on call in Gore to be on call for Sarah at Lumsden, but it takes 40 minutes to travel from Gore. So any emergency you get, that's not really a good response, is it?
I don't want to be over-dramatic here, but do you think that lives are being put at risk as a consequence of this model?
You're not being over-dramatic, Lisa. That's what I've been saying for a long, long time. And I'm not. I mean, I've been a midwife for 35 years, and I've stopped doing midwifery here because it's too scary. There is nobody that's got your back anymore. The DHB have taken every little bit of support that we had away. And I don't know how these girls are. I mean, Sarah is an amazing midwife. But, she can't keep doing this, knowing that every time she gets called to something, she's on her own, mate. She's got nobody there to back her up.
Have you heard from? Sorry, have you heard from Chris Fleming, the Southern DHB boss?
Today?
Yeah.
No, not at all. Sarah did contact Heather Liddell this morning to let her know that there'd been a birth at the hub and that it would need cleaning. That seems to be the process that we have to do. We just have to let the DHB know, and somebody turns up to clean. There is no contract to clean the place. But as a consequence of that, you know, like that lady went off home again, and then Sarah had another lady, and they went to Gore to have their baby because this place hadn't been cleaned. I'm not saying that she would have had the baby at Lumsden, but potentially she could have done.
Is that where she is right now?
Yeah, she's in Gore right now, yeah.
Nikki, you've got the floor. What do you want to say to the Southern DHP?
Well, I'm just a bit dismayed that they still haven't put in place an adequate backup for these two midwives that are left holding the baby, literally. And they are playing Russian roulette, and I don't think that's very satisfactory in this day and age at all.
If something does go wrong, who's that on?
It's not if, it's when, Lisa.
And that's midwife Nikki Peeling, and the Minister for Health, David Clark, was not available for an interview this evening. And listening to some of that was Southern DHB CEO Chris Fleming, and he joins me now live. Well, you've congratulated this family on their new arrival. So in your view, is this another positive birth experience?
No, look, we have congratulated the family on the arrival of their baby, and we are pleased that mum and baby are well. Look, we've undertaken significant review on the maternity services. We remain confident that we have improved the services across the whole of the district. We are still wanting to work with the midwives in the Lumsden Te Anau area around ensuring that there's an appropriate backup arrangement. The challenge, however, listening to Nikki just then, the concept of having a 24/7 staffed midwife in a location with less than one birth a week just isn't an effective utilisation of the resources. So that's why we've put additional hubs in the district, and we have put additional support for the midwives, and we are wanting to arrange appropriate backup for the midwives in the rural setting. And overall, the model of care across the entire district, we've invested more resources and it's costing us more.
So 3 babies born outside intended facilities over what period? Several weeks?
Yes, but I'd just go back. One of the urgent births was being transferred because they were a secondary birth and needed to get closer to a secondary facility.
Yeah, they didn't get where they were intending to have the baby though, so they were in the ambulance on the side of the road. I'm just wondering, what is an acceptable level of risk in the DHB's view? I mean, how much risk are you prepared to shoulder here?
Well, overall, we are confident that the balance of risk across the district has improved. That's why we had the model of care that we put in place reviewed both by independent midwives and also by the Ministry of Health before we made a decision about moving forward. We've got hubs in Te Anau, we've got hubs in Monica, and we've put sustainability funding in place for midwives overall, and we're providing some backup relief resources.
So what does your modelling tell you about the risk levels here? What is the probability of a serious negative outcome based on the services you are now offering?
The balance of probability across the entire district is that it has improved services. Absolutely. For the people in Lumsden, the fact that...
Can you put a number on it, though? So that's what I'm asking you. What's the likelihood of a bad outcome for a mother or baby here? Do you have percentages? Do you know what that risk is?
I don't have specific percentages across different parts of the district, but I know that the model overall improved services because in parts of our community, they had absolutely no additional resources, whereas across the district now we have strengthened the resources overall.
You would have heard Nikki Peeling there saying it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when there is a negative outcome. And she says when that happens, it's on the DHB's shoulders. Are you prepared to carry that?
Look, I'm confident that the overall model has improved, and maternity services in rural remote places are always challenging to provide. And just like the risks that exist in particular areas, we've enhanced the services across the entire district. And so we've minimised risk overall, but whilst we accept that the ability to have a primary birthing unit in Lumsden with less than one birth a week was a wonderful service. Overall, we have enhanced services overall. There's still more work to be done, though.
Okay, in terms of that additional work, when was the last time you personally, were in Lumsden talking to these midwives about their experiences? and what they need?
I haven't been to Lumsden directly myself recently, but my team has been engaging actively with them, and we're also organising a meeting to talk about the backup services across that wider district.
Did you talk to either of the midwives involved in this at all today? Did you bother to put in a call to them to discuss what had happened?
My chief nursing and midwifery officer put a call directly into the midwife involved. Did we put a call into Nikki Pelling? No, because we were not, until appearing on the radio, we weren't aware that she was involved. Sarah Stokes was.
Okay, so are you going to change anything as a result of events over the past few weeks? After today's birth, or last night, when a woman basically gave birth to her baby in the car park in the freezing cold in the dead of night with only one midwife, when the scenario is that you would want a second midwife there, are you going to change anything?
The woman gave birth on the way to the maternal and child hub, and as you know, the outcome has been positive overall. The concept in terms of what we are looking towards doing is how do we provide that backup infrastructure and support.
But you have also said that 24/7 backup for the midwives is not a reasonable expectation.
No, what Nikki was asking for wasn't backup. What Nikki was asking for was a fully staffed 24/7 facility with a midwife present 24/7.
And you've said that's not realistic.
That is simply not realistic.
So what can you do for them?
Well, as we've already said, we've articulated, we've increased the sustainability funding for them. We're providing backup and infrastructure and support. We're also providing relief time to enable the midwives to be able to have time
So
off.
nothing changes from the original plan then?
Well, no. As you know, we've also announced that we are doing a implementation review, and that's to check the implementation has proceeded, and the issues that we have encountered have been addressed.
So who's heading up that independent inquiry?
We'll be announcing that next week.
Have you appointed someone to the position?
We're in the final stages of that presently.
So you haven't actually started yet?
As I said, we are in the final stages presently because it's important that we get a clinical voice and some rigour into the process.
All right, just before we go, are you going to get them a cleaner as well? Because apparently the Lumsden facility didn't have someone there to clean it after the birth.
It perhaps suggests that Nikki doesn't know everything that's going on. There is a contract in place, and the cleaning was organised.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That is the Southern DHB CEO, Chris Fleming. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on this issue. A baby born in the car park outside a maternity hub, is that acceptable? Is it just one of these things that happens? Does something need to change about those maternity services? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A gun shop owner who was consulted as part of the government's buyback scheme says his advice has been grossly misrepresented and ignored. The details of the compensation plan were unveiled yesterday, outlining what gun owners will get for handing over firearms which were banned following the Christchurch mosque massacre. Here's our deputy political editor, Craig McCulloch.
2 months ago, Greg Carville was called to an Auckland office for a workshop run by KPMG to help design the buyback. For 5 hours, he and about 10 other dealers sat around a table with consultants. They discussed various ways the scheme could work. They listed types of firearms and estimated values. Now, Mr. Carville says it seems a waste of time.
It's a gross misrepresentation of what we did.
The police have issued a price list meant to represent the fair market value of each outlawed firearm. But gun owners only get a portion of that figure, 95% for a near-new gun, 70% for an average one, and 25% for one that doesn't work. Mr. Carville, who owns the Penrose gun shop Small Arms International, says dealers specifically warned against that approach.
We've pretty much all said that the 3-tier is very hard to grade and an oversimplification of it.
The dealers handed over a list of estimated gun values which in some cases had already been depreciated. Those figures, Mr. Carville says, appear to have been used as a base rate rather than a depreciated one. meaning the amounts being offered are far too little.
Firearms don't devalue in that rate. They're not like a television set that you and I could own, one that cost $5,000 3 years ago and now is only worth $1,200. They have a very slow devaluation rate.
The Police Minister Stuart Nash says a gun owner unhappy with the compensation offer has several options available. They can have their gun modified to make it legal, with the government covering $300 of that cost. They can, in some cases, apply for a collector's licence, allowing them to keep the firearm. And finally, he says an aggrieved gun owner can lodge an appeal with the police.
If he doesn't agree with the valuation that the police give for his weapons, he is able to pay $120 plus GST and get an independent valuation. If he does not like that, then he has recourse to the district court. This is not about ripping people off.
But the police have clarified a person can apply for a revaluation only if their gun has been significantly modified or it doesn't appear on the price list. The police say they'll release a list of valuers approved to carry out an assessment in the coming weeks. Mr. Carville says it's not good enough.
OK, if you've got a gun, and there's many guns that are not on that list, if you've got one that's not on that list, you have to appeal because their list is incomplete.
The opposition National Party supports the buyback in principle, but its MP Chris Bishop agrees the compensation's not enough.
The feedback I'm getting is that the prices being essentially compulsorily offered by the government are out of whack with what people actually think they're worth in the second-hand market. And so that's not fair market value.
KPMG also consulted farmers, hunters, auctioneers and gun clubs as part of compiling its advice to the police. The first collection event for the gun buyback scheme will be at Addington Racecourse in Christchurch on July 13th. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
A former top Hawke's Bay cricketer who indecently assaulted 11 women and posted an intimate photo of a passed-out woman online has been sentenced to more than 5 years in jail. 30-year-old Jason Trembath groped the women over a 2-month period in 2017, including schoolgirls and women playing in the park with their children. Anusha Bradley was at Napier District Court and filed this report.
Standing in the dock in a white shirt and looking down, Jason Trembath could be seen taking deep breaths as he was sentenced to 5 years and 4 months in jail. He was given 3 years and 9 months for groping 11 women in Rotorua, Napier Hill, Taradale and Havelock North during 2017. He targeted women wearing headphones while they jogged, watching and following his victims before grabbing their genitals and running away. Crown Prosecutor Steve Manning said the victims were shocked and still felt violated.
They're best summed up, sir, by the youngest of the victims, who at the time was a 17-year-old high school student, who says this at the end of her statement, quote, "The actions of the offender disgust me. Both myself and any individual have every right to be safe in our own community and to be able to go for a run or undergo any other recreational activity without such instances occurring."
Steve Manning said the whole community was affected as more women were assaulted.
And as each complaint came forward, it was obvious, sir, that there was someone operating in the community who was becoming increasingly bold, given that the behaviour that he was exhibiting was occurring often in broad daylight and in front of witnesses.
Trembath was a top cricketer, playing at a senior level for Taradale Cricket Club. He was also the general manager of a large commercial business in Hawke's Bay. His lawyer, Nicola Graham, said there was nothing in his background that would point to this kind of offending.
With Mr Trembath's background, this offending is almost inexplicable. There have been various factors put forward as to what has caused this offending, mostly methamphetamine, use of pornography and gambling addictions, sir.
But Judge Jeff Ray disagreed, saying Trembath's crimes were planned, repetitive and premeditated.
You were not debilitated by your methamphetamine use. You were quite able to operate in a business sense. You were quite able to operate at a very high level in the sporting field. And to suggest at this stage that somehow the use of methamphetamine or that in combination with anything else is the answer to what has occurred here and otherwise it wouldn't have happened seems to me to be nebulous.
Trembath will also serve 1 year and 7 months for taking and posting an intimate photo of a woman in a separate incident at a Napier motel in August 2017. Police only discovered the photo he'd posted on his Taradale Cricket Club team's closed Facebook page when they were investigating him for the assaults.
The picture showed his friend, Joshua Pauling, grinning at the camera while he straddled a woman who had passed out. Trembath also texted the photo to friends, naming the victim. Judge Ray described the offence as very serious.
You did it for amusement. You did it to demean somebody, and the nature of the photograph, which I do not intend to describe in open court, was such that it had a dramatic effect on anybody who saw it. The naming of that complainant, in my view, places this particular offending at a very serious level indeed.
Judge Ray said the effect of Trembath's offending on all 12 of his victims had been dramatic.
I have read the victim impact statements that have been supplied, and they are heart-wrenching. For a period of time, Mr Trembath, you brought a considerable amount of concern and fear to people in this community.
The head of the Hawke's Bay Criminal Investigation Bureau, Detective Senior Sergeant Brent Greville, says he hopes Trembath's victims will now have some closure.
Certainly for those victims that unfortunately were victims of him, it's a very traumatic experience. It was through absolutely zero fault of their own that they were assaulted in such a, as I say, predatory manner. It was horrible. But I'm hoping that this today will at least help them have, as I said earlier, some sense of closure and some confidence to go about their lives again.
Trembath's co-offender Joshua Pauling was sentenced to 150 hours community work and 9 months supervision for being party to an intimate recording. Both men were acquitted of raping the woman in the photo following a trial in May. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Labour MP Willie Jackson tells us his mum's illness is why he'll be voting in favour of the end-of-life choice bill next week. Protesters march on Oranga Tamariki offices around the country, and a young Samoan designer from Lower Hutt gets headhunted for New York Fashion Week. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program today. Let us know what's in your mind. You can text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to Susanna with the headlines.
A jailed serial groper has been told that his drug, pornography and gambling addictions are no excuse for what he did. Judge Jeff Ray said the effect on the 12 victims was dramatic. Another baby has made an unexpected arrival in Southland, with a baby delivered in the car park of the Lumsden Maternity Centre. The Lumsden Centre was downgraded to a non-birthing unit in April, despite strong community opposition, and since then 2 babies have had emergency deliveries in the area. The National Party has been leaked more government documents. It's been given a draft cabinet paper outlining plans to merge the 16 polytechnics into a single institute. Protesters say they will hold events almost every day around the country until Oranga Tamariki listens to their concerns. It comes as the ministry faces intense public scrutiny over the way it takes Maori babies from their whānau. Workers at a Bluff fish processing plant will fight plans to nearly halve their workforce. Sanford plans to cut up to 30 jobs and move white fish processing north to Timaru. A gun shop owner consulted as part of the gun lobby gun buyback scheme says the advice from dealers has been grossly misrepresented. Yesterday, it was announced gun owners will get up to 95% of fair market price for handing over banned firearms. Owners with firearms in an average condition will get 70% and 25% for those in poor condition. Donald Trump has reportedly stepped back from a planned military strike against Iran following the shooting down of an American drone over the Straits of Hormuz. The New York Times says the president had initially approved attacks on a handful of Iranian targets, such as radar and missile batteries. It says the operation was in its early stages when it was called off. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. You have come at the time of the business news.
The best time of the evening, I would argue.
Yes, Madison Reedy, you would argue that, in the studio with me right now. So, property investors, they're apparently feeling a bit more cheery about things, are they, in the most recent survey?
Yeah, so Colliers International, the real estate research firm, has done a survey of property investors' confidence. Now, it found that they've got a bit of a spring in their step despite it being winter. So they found that a net 26% of property investors that were surveyed do expect investment conditions to get better over the next year. Now, that's up from a net 22% that expect conditions to get better last quarter. Now, this result that we've seen in this most recent survey is actually the second highest that this Colliers survey has seen since December 2012. Believe it or not, that was actually 7 years ago now. It seems like just yesterday, doesn't it? Now, within the detail of that survey, property investors said that Tauranga was the best place where they were the most optimistic about conditions for investing. After that was Queenstown, which is no surprise. It's in my opinion the most beautiful place in the country. And then after that was our capital, Wellington, and then followed by Auckland. Now, Auckland did actually have a bit of a decent increase. It was up from 32% last quarter up to that net 36% level. Now, that's despite price growth in the city of Auckland actually souring over the past couple of months recently. Both Real Estate Institute of New Zealand and QV valuation figures have shown us that the Auckland market has been souring lately. But the reason that Auckland property investors are still feeling pretty good is because commercial and industrial property values have been booming lately. We're talking multi-million dollar valuations over the past year in that industry, so that's keeping them pretty happy. But you can definitely say that the reason why most of the country's property investors are feeling pretty good is because of that, dare I say it, no capital gains tax. So obviously that was taken off the table earlier this year, and they're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, and a modern lay-by system service, they reckon they can withstand regulatory review. What's the name of it again?
So this one that I was going to talk to you about was called lay-by. So, but there's actually many of them around. So these are, the industry is called buy now, pay later services.
So you get the goodies right there and then, don't you?
What they've essentially done is they've flipped the idea of the traditional lay-by. So the traditional lay-by where you'd go and put a down payment for your favourite pair of jeans, but you wouldn't actually get to take them home and wear them unless you pay off all of those instalments. But the way that these services work is that you can go into a brick and mortar retail shop, even your car mechanic or your dentist in some cases, and also online shopping. And you can actually choose an option to take and buy your product now. You can take it home with you, but then you pay it back over instalments. So it's a bit of a modern twist on the traditional lay-by.
Rent to buy jeans. Yep. Okay.
Exactly. So these are obviously growing like wildfire. There's a number of them in this country already, but they actually are largely unregulated in New Zealand. Similarly, in Australia, they're unregulated too, but across the Tasman, the Australian regulator, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, they did have a bit of a look into the industry to find out if or what the risks were. And they did find that because there's such a young audience and target market for these sorts of things, that people can risk becoming financially overcommitted. Because if your favourite pair of jeans is $200, but they offer it to you in $50 instalments over a couple of weeks, then that obviously sounds a lot more attractive. So it does have the potential to make people financially overcommit to purchases that they probably wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. But I did speak to our Lay-By's managing director, Gary Roloff. They're based in the United Kingdom now, but he came back here for a visit. And I asked him about this regulatory honeymoon that they seem to have been on, and he says that they actually do welcome a look. If any regulators here want to come knocking, then they are more than welcome to. And he says, hand on heart, that they do everything that they can in their business to make sure that their users don't go down that spiral of debt.
We're almost out of time, but let's do a quick trot around the markets. What have you got for us?
The NZX Top 50 Index closed up 0.35% tonight. That's a rise of 37 points to close at 10,327. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 65.9 US cents, 95 to the Australian, and 51.9 British pence.
Thanks, Maddie. Madison Reddy with your business update. Labour MP Willie Jackson says his mother's illness has led him to vote in favour of the end-of-life choice bill next week, despite her views against euthanasia. The second reading for David Seymour's bill is Wednesday, and Mr Jackson is among MPs who say they're concerned about parts of the bill, but want to hear the debate in Parliament, so will vote in favour. Dame June Jackson is suffering from a heart condition and dementia, and while she's outlived doctors' predictions, the family has been told she could pass away any time. She was a long-serving member of the parole board and an advocate for urban Maori. The chair of Labour's Maori caucus says he's having difficult discussions with his family over his mother's condition, but ultimately thinks he will vote against the bill at the final stage. He spoke to Alex Perrottet.
I was always of the view that I could never support the euthanasia. I could never support it. I suppose, given my upbringing, and the other side of things is that I've always been of the view that, and I suppose it's some would say it was a Maori view that your life was not just your life. It was always you're always part of a whānau, part of a community, and I know this is all the talk is always that it's your decision to make and only yours, and I always struggled with that view. I've always been of the view that it's you're part of a whānau, you're part of a community, and so I always thought I used to think there was somewhat that was a selfish type of view, that if you thought it was just all about yourself, I could never agree with that. So,
but something's changed your point of view, you're saying?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I respect a lot of the arguments that have been put up. That people do deserve dignity, and I've watched people suffer, and I'm going through some personal stuff right now, and it does change your mind of it,
Can you tell us a little bit about your mum and what emotions or feelings you have as you watch her in her last days?
Yeah, it's not an easy one to talk about because I haven't talked a lot about mum, but mum is. She was a very, she was Maori, a leader, a real what we call mana wahine, a woman who has been a leader in our community, vibrant, passionate, wonderful advocate for our people, and of course, the mum I knew before is not the same mum that I'm looking at today. And of course, it's heartbreaking watching having watched this transition. So you have to. You obviously are going through that. You've got your own personal views that are being challenged because some in our family, and I'm starting to think that way, thinking maybe there might be another way for mum, and I'm fighting with those. It's not, as I said, it's not easy, It's you're so fixed in terms of life is so precious, and then you've all of a sudden watching this total transition, this person who's no longer that vibrant, wonderful. Advocate or woman who she was. Now she's just a different person, really.
Has she lost that dignity in a sense? When you suffer and you change and you enter your last days, do you lose that dignity that you had during your life?
Well, I'll put it this way: I don't think my mother would like. A lot of people have wanted to see mum. A lot of Māori leaders, a lot of people around the country, and I haven't allowed it over the last 3 to 6 months. So I don't think my mum would like people to see her where she is right now. And it's very heartbreaking for us. So I'm at a point where I'm thinking that maybe this euthanasia option is an option, but I don't know if I don't think I'll support it right till the end, but I certainly think it deserves more debate,
right,
and more cordial, and so I've sort of shifted my views in the last couple of months because I understand the talk about dignity and about people having to have some dignity in terms of their life and how they want to go out. So I understand that. But the other side of that is I value life so much. I also have seen a system where vulnerable people, have lost their lives over the years. I've seen that firsthand in my community and in communities around the country. I worry about vulnerable people if this type of law comes in, whether they're going to be singled out. I worry about all that type of thing. So, I'm not absolutely fixed on euthanasia at all. I sort of can't. I don't think I'll be voting for it right at the end in terms of the third reading. But I think, given what I've been seeing at a personal level, hearing the arguments, it's probably worth allowing this to go a little bit further, the debate anyway.
And the debate has been going on for many years in different jurisdictions. Can I ask you, did your mother ever express an opinion on it?
She would never have supported the euthanasia. She was a person who always believed in life and whānau and us choosing. But my mother didn't know what she was going to go through, did she? She hasn't. Who would have envisaged her going through the sickness that she's gone through over the last year or so? So.
I guess that I know, and it sort of very delicately takes us into some territory that's perhaps not so hypothetical given this second reading vote on Wednesday. But if it became law and it was an option, and you knew very clearly that your mum wouldn't ever support it, would you still entertain it as an option?
Well, I don't think I would. But members in my family are changing their views. People are changing their views, and because there's such a sadness. It's hard to describe, I suppose.
There are people that say that a lot of the reason and the push for assisted suicide and euthanasia is the suffering that family, that whānau feel on witnessing the suffering of their loved one, more so perhaps than that person's own suffering as well, and that could, in a sense, lead to abuses in terms of coercion or the person feeling a burden themselves, or perhaps in the case of your mother, might not be able to even make the decision, and the decision is made for them by others.
Well, that's what you've got to take into account, and that's when you look at it, when you have a look at this, is that do you have that right to be making that decision, and knowing that knowing how much life is valued. The other side of things is my mother, through when I go to see her, there are some times where she's lucid and. There are moments, and so you value those moments, and I'm not talking about someone who's lost it altogether. She has some lucidity there at times, and so you can have the odd good moments with her, and I'm pleased about that. I'm pleased to be able to when you get those, but those are so few. Those are becoming so few that time, and she doesn't recognise a lot of people. She recognises the immediate family. I just can't see myself in the end supporting the euthanasia process. But well, who knows? We'll see.
And that's Willie Jackson talking to Alex Perrottet. It is about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that, for euthanasia or against it, and why. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. New Zealand football are in need of a new coach for the All Whites after the sudden departure of national men's team coach Fritz Schmid. In the role for just 16 months, Schmid has today confirmed in a statement he is returning home to Switzerland following careful reflection of my private and professional situation. Joining me now to discuss the news and look at what else is going on in the sporting world is Clay Wilson. Hi, Clay.
Kia ora, Lisa.
So, is this out of the blue, really, and what's behind it?
Yeah, it is a little bit. There wasn't any indication that he was going to leave, and we don't really know specifically why he is. We do know that the All Whites have only played 4 games in the 16 months he's been on board, so perhaps that is a factor. We also have reports today that he had a slightly strained relationship with the interim technical director of New Zealand football, who's Andy Boyens. I asked CEO Andrew Pragnell about that. He didn't speak specifically to that, but he did say that the feedback he'd had about Schmidt and around the football community was largely positive. So we don't really know exactly why. I guess the reasons may come out in the wash. Schmidt hasn't spoken himself, so let's see if he does eventually speak, or maybe the details will eventually come out.
So we don't know if he's got some flash other job yet?
No, it just sounds like he's going back to Switzerland, but I guess, things may change on that front.
So what happens now then, and are there any obvious sitters to take over from him?
Well, there is one, and it's one that people will know well. Danny Hayes, a former All White himself, was a striker. He's one of only about half a dozen players from New Zealand to play in the English Premier League, which is, of course, is one of the biggest leagues in the world. He's now coaching Eastern Suburbs, and they won the National League title in this recent season and have really done really well to do that, come from sort of somewhere where they weren't really expected to win the national title. He's already expressed an interest in the job. He's been endorsed by Winton Rufer, our greatest ever footballer. So let's see. Andrew Pragnell, the boss of New Zealand football, said to me they're not going to put a nationality bias on the job. So I guess that gives Hay a chance, because in the past, and sometimes in the past, some conditions have ruled New Zealand coaches out. So we might see. We haven't had a New Zealand coach of the All Whites since 2013, since Ricky Herbert left the job. So he would seem a good fit, but whether he gets the job or not, we'll see. About 8 to 12 weeks, I think they're looking for the period to replace Fritz Schmidt.
Shall we move to the oval ball now? And International Rugby League double header in Auckland tomorrow. What are you expecting?
Lots of red, probably, with Tonga involved, and we've seen what their fans have done in support of their team, the song and the noise and the flag waving. So the Kiwis are going to play Tonga. Before that, we have the Kiwi Ferns, the women's team, against Samoa. They've got a new head coach, so they'll be looking to get his tenure underway well. But looking at the Kiwis, the story this week's really been about Benji Marshall and Benji's come back into the black jersey 7 years away, so a lot of focus on him, and he's been really emotional about it, and spoke to him early in the week, and just really grateful and happy to be back. So I think it's been a really feel-good story for the Kiwis, that one.
Pretty grim weather forecast though, isn't it, for tomorrow? I think it is.
Yeah, well, it's been a grim all week.
It has. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Super Rugby playoffs starting on the weekend too. 4 teams from New Zealand in the mix. How many of them are going to come out trumps?
Well, 3 at best, because the Crusaders play the Highlanders tonight. The Crusaders, a stacked team, I think more than half a dozen All Blacks in their starting side. So you would expect them to beat the Highlanders, that game in Christchurch tonight. Early tomorrow morning, we've got the Chiefs in Buenos Aires. They're against the Jaguares, the Argentinian team. They actually won in Buenos Aires, the Chiefs, and they're probably arguably the form team of them coming into the playoffs despite their poor start. So you'd expect them to win. And then the Hurricanes against the Bulls tomorrow night in Wellington. The Bulls have arrived 24 hours late into Wellington. Joe Porter, our colleague down in Wellington, informs me. So that's going to make it really tough coming all the way from South Africa. You expect the Hurricanes to win. And then the other game not involving New Zealand team is the Brumbies against the Sharks. You expect the Brumbies to win that at home, which would mean the Chiefs head to Canberra for their semi-final.
We're running out of time, but I'm really curious about Israel Folau and developments with his case. What's going on there?
Yeah, well, he's obviously taking legal proceedings against his contract being torn up with Rugby Australia, and he set up a GoFundMe page to fund his legal battle, which he expects might go to the High Court. Obviously a very costly exercise to go through that, and lengthy. He's asking for $3 million. Now, this page has been up for less than 2 days. I checked before I came into the studio here. It's now more than $300,000 raised, so 10% of $3 million raised in just 2 days. So it looks like he's going to reach his target, but it's a wafty number, and also for someone who
is on a high priced contract.
So it does raise some questions, but I mean, he's obviously got a lot of support as much as a lot of questions out there, so definitely interesting. We'll see how that one moves forward. I think next week they go into conciliation with Rugby Australia, Folau and his legal team.
Interesting. Hey, Cricket World Cup's keeping people in my house up late at night and early in the morning. Black Caps on the verge of booking a semi-final spot.
Yeah, so they play the West Indies overnight tomorrow night. If they win that game, they're all but in the semi-finals.
Where's your money, Clay? Come on.
Well, I guess you never want to guarantee things too much, and the Cricket World Cup this tournament is a tournament where they could just as likely lose to the West Indies, who have lost 3 of their 4 games so far. So let's see. But form would suggest
hedging your bets.
Form would suggest they win. I'm definitely backing the Black Caps in this one, and then that gives them a bit of a buffer. I think 3 games before the semi-finals to perhaps tinker a little bit and try and find some form to hit the semi-finals running.
Wow. And with all that on the weekend, you'll be having a lot of couch time, Clay. There
exactly.
You go. That is Clay Wilson with a wrap of everything that's, basically going on in sport this weekend. Now, as public scrutiny grows over the actions of Oranga Tamariki, protesters are taking to the streets. People from the groups Unite as a Nation and Save Our Babies picketed the organisation's offices in New Plymouth, Hamilton and Christchurch today. Our reporter Katie Todd joined a small group of vocal protesters who spent their morning on Christchurch's Page Road.
Be the solution, not the illusion.
Loud hailers, sirens and placards reading "Hands off our tamariki" and "Save our babies." This noisy Christchurch protest was organised by Pee-wee Beard, who grew up in state care and says it's high time Oranga Tamariki took a less tough approach. She says she understands the important role that the ministry plays, but its approach needs fixing.
Ideal outcome is for Oranga Tamariki Child and Family to sit at the table with whānau and find a solution before an uplift, before a child care and protection issue is put in place, and to listen, sit side by side.
She says it's in the Treaty of Waitangi that Maori have the right to govern their own. Her brother, Mervyn Beard, says there's too many horror stories about Oranga Tamariki. He was moved to join the protest after seeing recent video footage of babies being taken from their families.
Just recently there was a video circling around social media of a young girl that was getting taken into care by the police, and it was just such a sad thing to say, As an older man, it practically brought me to tears just to see what's happening to our kids.
Also among the protesters was Tina French, who has been lobbying for change within Oranga Tamariki for months. She is doubtful that new legislation to be introduced in 2 weeks will ease the outcry over the removal of at-risk Maori babies into state care.
One of the most heartbreaking parts of dealing with SIFs is no one listens. No one listens. We're telling our story, we're telling our lawyers, we're approaching our local MPs, we're approaching media, and unless we've got concrete evidence, no one will listen. And that's really, really hard as a parent to know that your kids are in a bad situation and you can't do anything about it.
Ms. Beard says there are plans in place for protest action to continue.
Monday we're at the Sydenham office, Tuesday we're at the Papanui office, Wednesday we're out Rangiora, and Thursday we're out Horswell, and then we're back here on Friday. And then it's going to rotate until our big hikoi, which is on the 30th of July.
That hikoi will go right through the central business district in Christchurch and will coincide with events in 13 other parts of New Zealand. The protesters are hoping more people will be inspired to join them as they continue spreading their message. In Christchurch, ko Katie Todd, tēnei.
Let's get to some of your feedback now, and a lot of it coming in on Alex Perete's interview with Willie Jackson. This is on the second reading coming up for David Seymour's end-of-life choice bill. Guy says, read the Willie Jackson interview. What he needs to understand is that it's not about him. It is about an individual's right to choose their death through peaceful means rather than having to choose a painful, drawn-out death. It is about end-of-life choices. Another person says, euthanasia only for those individuals who can make that decision for themselves. And Helene also has commented on that issue, saying, I'm sorry to hear about Willie Jackson's mother. Perhaps he does not know that the euthanasia bill will not apply to people with dementia who have lost their capacity. On an interview that we did earlier in the program, which was about another baby. It's the third baby that's been born, outside a primary birthing facility. This one was born in the car park in Lumsden outside the maternity hub there. We spoke to Chris Fleming, who's the head of the Southern DHB. The midwives tell us that there wasn't a cleaner available to clean at the maternity hub. That's why they had to go somewhere else during the day for a second delivery that's happening. Mr. Fleming maintained that there was a cleaning contract. Well, Nikki Peeling, who is one of the midwives from down that way, who we also spoke to, has got in contact, and she says, in response to Mr. Fleming saying, I don't know everything about the contracts in place. No, I wasn't at Lumsden, but others were. The car that turned up to clean was a DHB fleet car. I'm sure a cleaner contract wouldn't have a fleet car to travel up to do the clean. I'm very tired of DHB management trivialising these births. The issue here was the lack of backup for Sarah and this lady to birth safely and with dignity, and that is from Nikki Peeling. And Sarah is the midwife who was with the woman when she gave birth in the car park. We should say that the mother and the baby are fine.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leia Tawa tēnei. The Southern DHB says maternity services have improved across the district despite 3 emergency births near Lumsden since its maternity centre was downgraded in April. In the latest, a Lumsden woman was forced to give birth in a car park today. It meant only 1 midwife was on hand, unlike 2 in a primary birthing unit, the next closest of which is in Gore, just over 40 minutes away. Local midwives and residents are calling on the government to reinstate the facility as a primary birthing unit. But the Southern DHB Chief Executive Chris Fleming says the concept of having a 24/7 staffed birthing unit in the town isn't a good use of resources, given there is just 1 birth a week there.
So that's why we've put additional hubs in the district, and we have put additional support for the midwives, and we are wanting to arrange appropriate backup for the midwives in the rural setting.
Southern District Health Board head Chris Fleming. The head of fishing company Sanford says they had no option but to not tell staff about upcoming job losses until the last minute. Workers at the company's Bluff fish processing plant were shocked to be told on Tuesday morning that up to 30 jobs may go as the company considers shifting part of its operations north to Timaru. Sanford's chief executive Volker Gunsmith says in an ideal world they could tell people much earlier, but that is not realistic.
If you told people a month in advance that there might be a change coming up, you put them into a very insecure and unpredictable situation, and that is what all of us wanted to avoid. The decision to actually take this step was only taken the afternoon before.
Volker Kunsch says they are hoping that while 30 positions may go, only 20 people may lose their jobs after workers are redeployed. The US President Donald Trump has been warned against bumbling into war after Iran shot down a surveillance drone. The Democrats' leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, made the remarks following a White House briefing on events in the Gulf. Iran's UN ambassador says the drone violated his country's airspace in breach of international law. The BBC's Chris Buckler reports.
Iran has not only taken responsibility for shooting down the American drone, it's warned that it will vigorously defend its land, air and sea. With detailed maps, the Pentagon has rejected claims that the unmanned aircraft was in Iranian airspace. But although Donald Trump said Tehran had made a very bad mistake, he's been relatively careful with his words. Some US media reports say the president approved military strikes against Iran, but later decided not to launch them amid congressional concerns about conflict.
Chris Buckler reporting. The High Court has awarded $500,000 in costs to a former trustee of Te Kohanga Reo National Trust Board. Tony Waho was unlawfully removed from his post in 2014 after alleging misspending at the trust. The Serious Fraud Office later found no crimes had been committed, but Mr Waho was accused of bringing the trust into disrepute and lost his job. The Kohanga Reo National Trust has been ordered to pay Mr Waho what he would have earned since his dismissal in November 2014 and his court costs. Mr Waho says it is disappointing to see so much money be spent by the Trust on court costs when it could have gone to tamariki and whānau. Since 2017, all of the trustees who served with Mr Waho have been replaced. The National Party has been leaked more government documents. It has been given a draft cabinet paper outlining plans to merge the 16 polytechnics into a single institute. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, reports.
The leak is perhaps more significant than the content of the document itself, which largely confirms the overhaul of vocational education that the government had proposed. The National Party's tertiary education spokesperson, Shane Retty, says the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, is taking the paper to Cabinet on Monday. Mr Hipkins says National appears to have parts of a draft paper, but he was not going to take it to Cabinet next week. The National Party says it has now received 8 leaks on subjects including the cannabis referendum and the government's budget priorities. Ko John Gerritsen, TNA.
A group of bowel cancer specialists is calling for an overhaul of the screening program, saying patients are being given misleading results. Associate Professor Brian Cox from Otago University's Hugh Adam Cancer Epidemiology Unit says patients are simply told they have tested positive or negative for blood in their stool samples based on a cut-off point. He says patients who are told they have a negative result could assume there is no blood at all, when in fact they may have high levels.
In many countries, the level of blood in the stool that would be reported as negative by the bowel screening program, in many other countries, that would, in Australia and Denmark, for example, they would be referred for colonoscopy.
Dr Cox, who has jointly written a letter to the New Zealand Medical Journal with other specialists, calling for change, saying failings to give patients their numerical result could breach the Code of Health and Disability Consumers' Rights. It's 6:05. New Zealand Rugby is placing the blame for the collapse of the Nations Championship squarely on England. World Rugby were forced to drop plans for the Nations Championship after failing to get unanimous support for the new competition. The 6 nations unions, of which England are the most powerful, voted unanimously against the plan. New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Steve Tew says what England wants, it gets.
A significant proportion of the money that is generated for World Rugby is generated in the English market, backed up second biggest chunk by the French market. And so we are always fighting that reality. That's where the money comes from, and it ends up being distributed much more significantly to the 6 nations than it is to anyone else in the game. Do we like it? No. Is it grossly unfair? Well, it's a debate that we continue to have.
Steve Tew has confirmed the All Blacks will host Wales twice and Scotland once in next year's July Test window, with the venues yet to be confirmed. The New Zealand football boss, Andrew Pragnell, is confident a lack of games will not be a factor in attracting a top-quality new coach for the All Whites. The coach of the men's national team, Fritz Schmid, confirmed his resignation effective immediately today. The team had just 4 games during the Swiss coach's 16 months in charge, but Pragnell says the All Whites will have a busy schedule over the next 18 months.
The calendar, although we haven't completely confirmed it yet, is looking very, very positive for 2020, both obviously with the Olympics, but also each and every FIFA window as we gear up towards qualification. So it's about how we making sure we get the role right, and then if we get the job description right, we'll get the right people flying as well.
New Zealand football boss Andrew Pragnell. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Indian writer Arundhati Roy, her essay collection is called My Seditious Heart. Quite accurate, she has been charged with sedition by the Indian government, and she continues to be a thorn in its side, especially for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Actor Julian Arahanga on his new project, a 19th century comedy drama about wrestling. And Susan Murray reflects on her 21 years of RNZ National's country life. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Scattered rain clearing from the west today, partly cloudy. High cloud developing tomorrow with scattered rain in Northland from the evening. For Gisborne, fine spells, a few showers mainly this evening. Auckland to Wellington, also central high country, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Partly cloudy in the west, isolated showers from Whanganui northwards. High cloud developing and thickening tomorrow. For Nelson and Marlborough, fine weather. Canterbury, Otago and Southland fine today, apart from rain about Stewart Island. Cloud and isolated showers spreading northwards tomorrow. Bulla, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Westland and Fiordland showers becoming isolated tomorrow morning, but clearing Fiordland. Thunderstorms are possible south of Hokitika until early tomorrow morning. Chatham Islands, rain clears early with a foggy start tomorrow. You're with RNZ National and it is 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Workers at one of Bluff's biggest employers says they will fight to save their jobs after finding out almost half of the workforce could be cut. Many are still reeling from the news. Up to 30 jobs may go from Sanford's Bluff fish processing plant as the company considers shifting part of its operation north to Timaru. Unsuspecting workers were outraged on Tuesday when the plan was announced. Union members met in Bluff this afternoon to discuss their options. Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton is in Bluff.
Air2 Union delegate Linda Bevan says she feels betrayed after 17 years of service to Sanford.
Family, they're my family. You know, we're all family. It's a very close-knit community. Both factories work together, you know, at some point, and we all know each other, and they're hurt and just broken, just devastated.
She says the loss of 30 jobs will be devastating to the small community of Bluff.
Some of these workers got a single income and have young families, and so it's going to affect the schools, it's going to affect the businesses, you know, where people are spending their money at the moment. These people are on minimum wage, but we're very loyal to this company.
Loyalty that Linda Bevan says hasn't paid off. So far there's talk of a petition and community meetings to help save the jobs. Union delegate Andrew Ron says Sanford has lost the trust of the community.
Yeah, I could feel the emotion when I walked in here. There's still a lot of real raw emotion here. Bluffies are quite resilient, you know, and mentally tough down this way too, because look where we live, you know, the end of the world. Yes, and it's really has shaken us to the core. It's kicked us, you know, and we're quite a hardy people, but this has certainly been another kick in the guts for us.
Air2 Union delegate Karen Wilson has been working at the fish processing plant for the past 30 years. There, she was able to watch her children grow up in her hometown. She says the workers are still reeling from the news. And Ms Wilson says managers found out barely minutes before their workers when they were shuffled across the road to break the news.
It was shell shock, unbelievable. It was like being kicked in the gut. Your head just spun. You couldn't think of anything to say or do, or it was just like walking in a space that wasn't real.
The future had looked bright. Sanford was given a green light to expand its salmon operation in the lower south earlier this year.
But that's no good to us now. We need them now, the jobs now that they promised when they went for the resource consent. It's not fair, it's not on.
Sanford's chief executive, Volker Kuntz, says it's looking at opportunities for redeployment at other sites and within the company, and expect that while 30 positions might go, that will only leave 20 people out of a job. Despite the job losses, Mr Kuntz says he is still very confident about the future of the business in Bluff.
What we should not underplay is the importance of Bluff as a salmon facility, and that has a great future. And with our recent consent approval to actually increase the amount of farming that we can do in Stewart Island, there's a fantastic future for that operation.
Volker Kuntz says details around the jobs will be confirmed near the end of July. As for the union, delegates say they're gearing up to fight for their jobs. In Bluff for Checkpoint, Tess Brunton, Tane.
A gunsmith of 50 years has joined a growing chorus of voices saying the government's buyback scheme is an anti-democratic rip-off and that some gun owners will simply ignore it. Rod Woods says people stand to lose up to 50% of the value of their now illegal weapons due to law changes introduced as a result of the Christchurch mosque shootings. Mr Woods talked me through what he'd get back for one of his guns under the proposed buyback scheme.
The retail price was $1,750. I've since modified it and added bits and pieces that have probably added another $1,000 to it. The price they're paying for that basic firearm, the base price is $1,500, of which I can only look forward to getting 95% of.
What do you think of that?
Well, I'm in the fortunate position that I can, if I so choose, because of my various other licences, I can apply for the special licence to retain it in my possession, albeit with a vital part removed and stored separately, and never be able to fire it. But I can actually keep it if I so desire. They're talking about wanting another $200 off me for the endorsement to do so, which I think is grossly unfair, because I had an e-endorsement that I also paid $200 for that they've since taken off me with this legislation.
Right, but if you were one of the people forced to cash up, you're saying that all in that weapon is worth about just short of $3,000, and ultimately you would only get half of that back. So how appealing do you think that will be to people?
Well, from my discussions with various people that I meet from day to day, some people would find that they've had an inexpensive semi-automatic for some years, and the buyback price for them is reasonably attractive. Not dramatically so, but reasonably so. To the enthusiasts that perhaps have a few firearms and they've looked after them and added bits and pieces to them, almost to a man, they're dissatisfied with what's being offered. And I've heard many, many talks that, look, if it's not going to be worth my while, why the hell should I hand it in?
Really?
And this is from law-abiding people.
Do you believe that normally law-abiding people will retain their weapons because the price is not good enough?
I think the vast majority of them are going to think twice about handing them in. Ultimately, I guess a lot of them will do so. But, there's been a total demonisation of innocent parties here, and we're the ones that are going to be financially suffering, and the country is going to be financially suffering, I might add, for something that will have absolutely no effect on any similar unfortunate event occurring in the future.
So how is the country financially suffering out of this?
Well, we're probably to the tune of close to $1 billion having to fund this confiscation and compulsory compensation system that they've got. The compulsory compensation is actually going to be less for a lot of people who are innocent law-abiding people. They bought the stuff legally. They've had a loss of liberty. They've had a loss of enjoyment, which they're not being compensated for. We haven't caused any problems. We're not going to cause any problems, but we're going to suffer financially. We're going to suffer a loss of liberty. We're going to suffer a loss of enjoyment for absolutely zero benefit to the country.
What about the benefit being that we may all be safer?
But you were never in danger in the first place. It's counterproductive to the good feeling of the people regarding the government. And what's it achieving? To my way of thinking, it's political zealotism and nothing else.
So, Rod, how do we make this better then and more enticing? Is it that the government has to throw more money into the pot to make this happen?
There needs to be accurate compensation. The list that they've put out is comprehensive but not all-encompassing by a long way. And there is provision for firearms that may well be outside the parameters of the list to be independently valued, but they're asking that the owners pay a $120 fee to have this valuation done.
Right, okay. Well, in terms of the list, run through what your thinking is for, say, an AR-15 in terms of what it would have cost and what you might get back for it.
Well, my own example is a rifle that had a retail value of $1,750. They've put a base price of $1,500, of which I can look forward to 95% of that, even though the firearm is in brand new condition.
I understand that you were in Wellington when the details of this buyback were announced. So what were you doing there? Who were you meeting with? What were you talking about?
I was one of a police partnership group to do with collectors, and we were there to work with the police to try and figure out a means by which this law can be processed and worked through in a manner that's fair to all parties. the legislation in its basic form is largely unworkable. The police are in the unfortunate position of being between a rock and a hard place, trying to make something work that was developed in the first place with the deliberate intention of not including people that actually knew what they were talking about.
So did you get any joy from that conversation, Rod? Because it sounds like it's unlikely.
Well, the police were very good in listening to us and made a few concessions that they would look into. There's no guarantees, of course. And while we were in the meeting, of course, the buyback announcement came on the television, and we put it on the overhead projector. We watched it for a few minutes and we turned it off because it was a waste of time.
You found it that distasteful? You just hit the off button?
Well, even the police in the room were pretty much in agreement that it was just political speak that was going on. There was no substance to it. There was no point in watching it.
And that was Gunsmith Rod Woods. It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A survivor of physical and sexual abuse says he's frustrated that the abuse inquiry could get sidetracked as it investigates a staff member. The Royal Commission of Inquiry into State Care and Faith-Based Institutional Abuse will start public hearings later in the year and is due to report back to Government in late 2020. The Commission says the allegations against the staff member have been referred to the police. Jordan Bond reports.
Tony Jarvis has been fighting for justice for more than 40 years after being physically abused as a young boy by his adoptive parents. Earlier this year, the 58-year-old was announced as one of 20 members of the Survivor Advisory Group to represent all survivors in advising the inquiry. Today, the Royal Commission announced an investigation into a staff member after allegations were raised. Mr. Jarvis is frustrated and feels such an important issue of doing justice for victims has been sidetracked.
Right from its outset, we've had nothing but criticism about this and people trying to pick holes in it and raise different issues to undermine the whole process, And that's totally unfair to the thousands and thousands of survivors who this is about.
Earlier this year, there were questions around a potential conflict of interest as both the chair, Sir Anand Sachinand, and another commissioner are themselves Catholic. Mr. Jarvis says it took many years to get an inquiry, and it's too important to too many people for it to lose focus on doing justice.
It's the one and only opportunity to come forward, to tell their stories, to be heard and, try to make a change in their lives and as a result of being abused in state care and faith-based care.
Today, a Maori justice campaigner criticised the inquiry for appointing a mongrel mob member with a domestic violence conviction to a key role. Paola Moyle says 2 women, including a state abuse survivor, approached the Commission in recent months with their fears around Harry Tam's behaviour. Ms Moyle says Mr Tam has key roles on the Commission which allow him to access survivors' personal information, and that is untenable. The Royal Commission has started an independent investigation into allegations, and if there are grounds, it will act immediately and appropriately. The National Party's Justice spokesperson, Mark Mitchell, says it's disappointing an investigation had to start, but is reserving judgment given details aren't known.
For me, it's just got to be done very quickly, sensitively and reported back. What I'm really worried about is that the Commission relies on having the confidence of the public, and we don't want to see that diminished or damaged in any way because then they become less effective in terms of the very important work that they're doing.
Mr Mitchell says survivors should still participate.
This is hopefully just one isolated incident. We don't know all the details yet. I still have a high level of confidence that they'll resolve quickly. And look, I'd still encourage victims to be able to step forward with confidence to engage with the Commission.
In a statement, the Minister responsible for the inquiry, Tracy Martin, says she's been made aware the Commission is investigating serious allegations. She has asked for progress updates, but as the Commission is independent, she says it would be inappropriate for her to comment further. A Green Party spokesperson says the Royal Commission needs to do further work to ensure victims have faith in the inquiry and feel safe to participate. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
Dozens of applications for financial assistance have been received by the Westland Mayor 3 months after a devastating storm. A storm in March which dumped a metre of rain in the district, destroyed the Waiho Bridge and caused widespread damage to roads, farms and businesses' bottom lines. Whilst the Waiho Bridge has been fixed, some people, especially business owners and farmers, are still picking up the pieces. A mayoral relief fund was set up after the event and applications have just closed in the last hour or so. Westland Mayor Bruce Smith spoke with our South Island reporter Logan Church about the range of help people are requesting.
Considerable interest. A number of applications and still coming in today. They've got till 5 o'clock tonight and from quite a range. I'm quite staggered by the range of applications.
So what kinds of applications have been received?
A couple are from businesses that were on the south side of the Waiho and were put out of business pretty much by the event because it's still not really in order there. There's applications from farming groups to put in water supplies, reconnect water supplies back in. There's applications from volunteer groups who have spent money on providing volunteer services for fencing, rubbish collection, quite a range actually. So the members of the panel are going to have some fun working through it.
In terms of numbers, obviously more, as you said, are coming in today, but how many applications have been made so far?
I can't give you the exact number, but looking at the file, it's probably 30. This is a $75,000 grant that was made by the government, and I think it's going to do a lot of good. You know, when you get an event that occurs in the middle of your tourism season, it takes out a bridge which instantly on the day that bridge went out, the cancellations were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for accommodation providers. The cafes went empty. It was, I guess, it's the technology today where everything's instant, and so the cancellations were instant, just like the way things started up again when the bridge was opened. It was very, very quick.
And that's Westland Mayor Bruce Smith speaking to our South Island reporter Logan Church. Finally tonight, more than a decade after they appeared in London's West End, the award-winning costumes from the musical Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, are gracing the stage of the Showplace in New Plymouth. Based on the 1994 film, the production features more than 500 costumes and 100 wigs, some still with Jason Donovan's name in them, and they require a specialist to look after them. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter, Robin Martin, went backstage on opening night.
Sarah Buchanan is a Christchurch hair, wig and makeup professional with 30 years' experience in the business. When Priscilla was announced for a run in the Garden City and in New Plymouth, she stepped up to care for the West End costumes, which are in New Zealand for the first time. Miss Buchanan picked up the extravagant outfits in Auckland, where she was briefed on their safekeeping, and has been with them ever since. She says Priscilla presents unique challenges.
Well, having so many costumes and a small group of actors, you can imagine everyone's wearing multiple costumes, and one after the other, every single number, every single show song, a new costume is introduced. So it's fast changes, hair, makeup and costume backstage continually the whole time. It doesn't stop from start to finish.
The frocks are Tim Chappell and Lizzie Gardner creations, the same duo who won the Oscar for Best Costume Design in 1995. Miss Buchanan says it's a privilege to have them in New Zealand, even if they did need a little bit of TLC.
They actually came from the original UK production. Jason Donovan's name is actually still in one of the costumes. So when we got them, they were a little bit battered, but Christchurch spent a lot of time putting them back together and re-shining them up, repainting and sewing and putting them back together. So we got them into a state that was totally immaculate and looking fantastic.
Taranaki teenager Josh Clark is playing Felicia in the New Plymouth Opera Society's production. The 18-year-old goes from wearing barely anything at all to the most outlandish outfits imaginable. He's still coming to terms with the fact that the costumes had come from Europe.
I never really imagined that I would be wearing costumes from the West End in New Plymouth, for sure. Maybe if I was on the West End or maybe Broadway, they might share the costumes with the West End, but definitely never thought that such high calibre costumes and set and all that would come from such professional shows.
Josh does have a particular favourite.
I really like the final costume, the big Sydney Opera House one, and especially once we do this big finale in that outfit and we do this big pose, and then we get to go off and take off the big skirt part, and we're just wearing kind of a blue shirt and these blouser kind of shorts, and it's kind of the most relaxed, chilled outfit that I wear the whole show, so it's a good chance to kind of relax and come out as myself.
But not everyone gets to dress as a diva. 11-year-old Charlie Betts, who plays Benji, has a much more down-to-earth look.
In the finale, I have a big kangaroo costume with a big kangaroo head and Michael Jordan size shoes. It's impossible. Yeah, tripping over everywhere.
Whether it be kangaroo suits or ball gowns, the punters just loved it.
Oh, they're really awesome, very flamboyant, awesome on stage to watch. I reckon they're on point right now.
Really good, quite amazing, so yeah.
Thoroughly enjoying it. The costumes are just wonderful and the singing is wonderful.
They're so well done together.
Absolutely, they're really stunning. I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
Priscilla plays at the New Plymouth Showplace until July the 6th, before the costumes wing their way back to the West End. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin aho.
And we've got just enough time for a bit of your feedback on maternity services in the southern DHB region. This person's saying it's the second time Chris Fleming, he's the DHB boss, has been on radio justifying the changes to maternity services. Giving birth is such an emotional and physical event, the birth of life, so much at stake. Women and carers should not be, if at all possible, put in a position where things can go wrong and there's no safe birthing space. On the other hand, someone says Chris Fleming was very good, clear and articulate. There's two sides to every story. Back next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Southern District Health Board says maternity services have improved despite 3 emergency births since the Lumsden Maternity Centre was downgraded. The fishing company Sanford defends not telling staff about upcoming job losses until the very last minute. The US President Donald Trump is warned against bumbling into a war with Iran. National receives its 8th leak of government documents, and a former trustee of Te Kohanga Reo Trust National Board has been awarded $500,000. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
He wants PNG to be the richest black Christian nation on earth.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
We're looking for love in our 60s, our 70s and our 80s and putting way too much detail online.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.